Happy coding.
Hey there, this is Kevin from Happy Coding here, and I am going to work through this Leetcode problem, this remove element problem. I am going to take a slightly different approach than most like Leetcode code along videos take, because I'm going to sort of walk through this as if I am in an interview. So I'm going to sort of talk through the problem from both perspectives, both from the interviewer, kind of framing the question and the kinds of things I would look for, and as the candidate, sort of teasing out the problem and approaching it. So Leetcode is often used for interview prep. So with that, I am going to sort of frame it in that kind of setting instead of just diving straight to some clever solution. So transport yourself, if you will, to a job interview, and your interviewer might give you a sort of high level, maybe like precursor problem, which might say like given an integer array nums and an integer val, remove all occurrences of val of the value from the array. And Leetcode gives you a lot more here, like a lot more in this case. But that high level framing might be all your interviewer gives you. And it's often left like pretty vague, and it's up to you as the candidate to kind of tease out the real question or the technical requirements of the question. So, what I might start to ask if I was the candidate is like, first off, can you give me like some example input and output? Let's see, where is that? Um, in Leetcode just gives that stuff to you kind of automatically if you scroll down. But if I'm in a interview, I'll have to sort of ask for that. So, an example is like if nums is 3223 and the val that I give it is 3, then what I want to do is first off return the count of the elements that were not equal to 3, I think. Let me double check that. Yeah, not equal to 3. And then I don't even return the array, actually. I modify the array to only contain the values that were not equal to 3. So in that case, those are just these 2s here. So in this case, let's see. So 0, 1, 2, 2, 3, 0, 4, 2. So this example is sort of cluing me in. Actually, they both kind of clue me into this. Like the array is not sorted, looks like. So that's maybe another question I could ask my interviewer. Like, can the array be sorted, or will I get values in kind of a random order? Looks like it'll be random order, so that's something to keep in mind. Anyway, if val is 2, then the output is 5 because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values that are not equal to 2. And the array is modified to have the elements that are not equal to val. So 0, 1, 4, 0, 3. And some other questions that I might ask as the candidate is, does the order of the numbers in the array matter? Do I have to preserve their original order? And in fact, no, it does not. I could also ask, does it matter what comes after the initial like set of numbers? So after the 5 numbers, like, do these have to be the 2s, or can these be -1s, or some other sort of sentinel value? And in this case, it doesn't actually matter. I can do whatever I want. Some other examples might be like, can the numbers be negative? And in this case, no, they won't be negative. Looks like they'll be between 0 and 50, actually. So they also won't be like huge numbers. And I could maybe check for other exceptional cases, like what if nums is null or empty? In fact, nums can be empty, so it could have a length of 0. So that's another thing I'm just sort of filing away in my brain. And if I'm in an interview environment and I don't have Leetcode over here, I might be like writing these down in a comment, like array can contain duplicates. For example, array can be empty. I'm just writing down the answers to what my interviewer is telling me. Okay, so I have worked through sort of understanding an example input and output, and that's just a conversation I'm having with my interviewer. And I have also sort of teased out the boundaries of the problem or the corner cases that I will have to be thinking of. So now in an interview environment, I am thinking about how I would implement this. And how I approach this very generally as a candidate is I do a couple of things. One, I'm looking for like a brute force approach. Is there something I can do that might even violate some of the requirements? So like maybe I don't even care about doing it in place at first. In fact, maybe my interviewer didn't even say that at the beginning. Maybe that would be a follow-up question. So I'm thinking about how I would do this without doing it in place, and I could see maybe creating, I don't know, like an array list or something, and then maybe I could just call remove on value, or remove, yeah, I'll just keep calling remove on the value until it doesn't contain it. That might work. It would not be in place. So then I would have to modify my array to like reflect what's in my array list. So that could work. So that might be one way to approach it. I am kind of what I'm thinking about right now is I'm getting ahead of myself, to be honest with you, and I'm thinking like the array list.remove function. I think that can take an element or an index. So maybe that's a little bit weird, but I wouldn't be able to look this up in a real life interview, but because I'm on Leetcode and I'm just kind of thinking out loud, I am going to look this up. So what does remove look like? So remove, yeah, it can either take an int, index, or an object. So I might have to convert that to like a capital I integer wrapper before I call remove. And yeah, let's try that actually. So maybe I'll say array list integer list equals new array list. And I'm going to give it nums. And I'm going to say what? I'm going to count how many times I remove value. So int removed equals 0 at first, and I need this because this is what I'm going to return. I'm going to return, oh wait, no, I'm wrong. I need to return the number that weren't removed, actually. So this is probably just going to be nums.length minus removed, so that'll work actually. So I want to do something like while list.remove, and here I want to do like integer.value of val. Val is kind of a silly argument name, but whatever. I want to say removed plus plus, so I'm counting the number of times I've removed my element, and after I escape out of that while loop, so list.remove, yeah, so returns, I think it returns true or false. So returns false if it doesn't. Returns true if the list contained. And yeah, okay. So if it did not contain the element, it'll return false. So I'll exit out of this loop. So then I want to say something like for int I equals 0, I is less than list.size I plus plus. And then I want to say nums of I equals list.get I. And then I return what? I return my nums.length minus removed. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of cheating because I'm not doing this in place, but this is just getting something working. I am creating an array list, and I'm like taking advantage of the Java language here and the functions that it gives me. And I'm relying on this remove function to remove the value. And as long as I remove the value, I am incrementing my removed count here. Then I'm copying my array list back into my array. So I'm kind of tricking it into thinking that I did it in place, even though it wasn't in place because I created this separate data structure. And then I'm returning the value. So let's just run this and see what happens. Okay, cool. Love it. Beautiful. Why? Oh, cannot infer type arguments. I think this is because this is lowercase I array list, and I need this to be uppercase I. This is gross, but just to get something working, what I might do is for int I equals 0, I is less than list or nums dot length, I plus plus. Probably other ways to do this, but just to get it working, I want to add everything from my array to my array list. So, all right, whoops, that won't work. All right, let's see if this makes it happier. And no, it doesn't. Cool. So, oh, list.get, list.add, add to the array list, not get. And I'm kind of rushing through this because this is kind of cheating. This isn't actually answering the question, but in an interview, I might try something like this just to have like something working. If this was ending up taking me longer than doing it in place, it wouldn't actually help me, but I just want to get something working. So let me submit this and see if that actually worked. And it did. Okay, so I guess Leetcode is not smart enough to realize that I cheated by not doing it in place. So that's cool. Also, I guess I'm pretty slow here. 1 whole millisecond is not very fast, I guess, relative to other people who actually did this in place, but that's okay. So I got sort of a version of this question answered or this problem solved. This technically fulfills most of the requirements. And again, in an interview environment, it's pretty likely that my interviewer would have started with this version of the question. They would have said, can you remove the elements of the array that are equal to value? Then I would do this and they would say, okay, cool. Now, can you do it in place? Which means no more creating an array list, no more relying on Java's functions that it gives you. You have to do it yourself. So great, let's dive into that. I am going to keep some of this around, I guess, and just give myself some white space. I'm going to comment all this out. Could just delete it, but whatever. Okay, so what I need to do is, okay, I'm working without the, I don't know, safety net of the Java API. I need to do everything myself. So some of this will actually be kind of similar in like in principle. So I do need to loop over my input, and I do need to maybe keep track of how many elements are not equal to my value. So maybe I'll start with a for loop, or maybe I should say that in a interview environment, what I would do at this point is talk through at a high level what I want to do. So I would have a for loop that does iterate over every element in my array. So 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to the end. And if my element is not equal to my value, then that's easy. I do nothing, actually. I might increment a count of this is the number of elements that were not equal to my value. But other than that, I leave it alone. It's there. The other case is if I am looping over my element or my array, and I get to an element that is equal to val, I need to remove it. And here's where it gets maybe a little tricky, because if I remove an element from my array, I need to shift all of the other elements down by one. So I could do that. I could write that out, and I could like shift that down. Actually, let me do that. I am going to maybe have like an inner for loop that then shifts everything down by one. Likely I'll want to follow that up with something more efficient, but let's just get this version of it working. So for int I equals 0, I is less than nums dot length, and I plus plus. What do I want to do? I want to say, maybe I'll create a variable int element equals nums of I. And what do I want to do here? I want to say, if element is not equal to val, then I want to do something. What do I want to do? I want to increment my count. I want to say, create a count int like not equal count equals 0. And then I'm going to increment that here. So not equal count plus plus. Okay. And then at the very end, I know that I am going to return that. Return not equal count. So that's like half of the problem. I am returning the number. They call it k here. So I've returned the value, the count of the values that are not equal to val. That's kind of confusing, but hopefully that makes sense. But that's only, half of the battle, or maybe probably less than half, because the other thing that I need to do is shift all of my elements down if it is equal. So I could just say like else here, maybe. So I'm staring at it a little bit because this is a little awkward. Like I'm starting if not equal instead of if it is equals. It doesn't really matter, but that might be something I call out as I'm typing and as I'm like walking through my code with my interviewer. Anyway, if my element is equal to my to val, then I need to shift the rest down. And this is going to get kind of gross. This is probably going to be another for loop. So for int, I'll say j for now. It's kind of yucky, but it's okay. J equals not 0. J equals I. So I'm starting at my current index. And I am saying j is less than what? J is less than nums.length minus 1. So I'm not going to go all the way to the end. I'm going to go to the second to last element, and then j plus plus. So then I'm going to say nums of j equals nums of j plus 1. So I am saying that this element set it equal, or this index, or the placeholder at this index, actually set it equal to the next index. So I'm copying the next index into my current index all the way to the end of the array. So I'm shifting the end of the array down, essentially removing my current element because it is equal to val. So, so that's something. I have an inkling that I need to change my I because the next time around I'm going to say I plus plus. I've just shifted everything down in my array, which means that I am going to skip over what I just shifted down. So this is a little gross, but just to get something working, I'm going to say I minus minus here. The reason for that is, so let's see if we can work through an example. Here actually is a great example. So val is 2 here. So I'm going to say 0. I skip over that. That's here. That's this case. 1, cool. Then I get to here. I get to index of 2, actually, and element is 2. That equals val. So I shift everything down. So this 2 moves here, this 3 moves here, this 0 moves here, etc., etc. But since I've shifted all of these values down and I've gotten rid of this 2, I now need to check this 2, which is now at index 2 instead of index 3. So instead of iterating I by 1, I need to stay at the current index. So that's what this I minus minus is doing. So this is kind of gross, but I think it might work. We'll see. So let me walk through this kind of line by line. So I start with not equal count equal to 0. Okay. Then I set up a for loop that loops over every single element in my array all the way to the very last one. And I get the element at that index and I say, if my element is not equal to value, then all I do is increment this variable and I go back to the next iteration of the loop. Again, I get the element, and in this case, let's say that the element is equal to val, then I'm going to say, create a new for loop, start at the current index, go all the way to the end, and shift the elements left by 1. Okay. So this is doing it in place. It's a little gross, and I'll talk about why in a second, but let's just run this and see what happens. All right, cool. That's not unexpected. I wish that it would tell you that you were like otherwise correct, but your time limit was exceeded, but it's fine, I guess. Are they both, is it both time limit exceeded? In any case, let's assume that this is right. I feel like it's right, but I'm not gonna check it because I know that this is there are better ways to do this. So if I was in an interview environment and let's say I came up with this solution, I'm feeling pretty okay because it works. It's brute force, but it works and it does do it in place. I'm no longer relying on like an array list or any other data structure. So I have satisfied that like extra criteria. However, my interviewer will likely ask a follow-up question. So they'll likely say, like, what is the algorithmic complexity of this approach, of this algorithm? Or they might just say, is there any way that you can improve it? In either case, let's work through both kind of questions. So if I'm thinking about algorithmic complexity, I am looking at this for loop, which iterates over every element in the input in nums and does, okay, let's see, some constant time stuff, constant time stuff, constant time stuff. And then I get to this next for loop. And this also loops over, in the worst case, every element in the array. So let's say, for example, I don't know, every element in the array was value. It was just like a bunch of, I don't know, a bunch of 2s. And I said, I need to remove every 2. I'm going to end up looping over every element in the array. And then for each of those elements, I'm going to loop over every subsequent element in the array, which will come out to be O of n squared. So this is O of n squared algorithmic complexity or runtime complexity. So then my interviewer would likely follow up with like the most common interview question is, can you improve this? So is there some approach I can take where I can do this in less than n squared time? And okay, let's think about that. So if I think about this case here, I want to come up with an algorithm that does not use like a nested loop. So what I'm doing in my brain is like pattern matching, honestly, like algorithms I know about or data structures that I know about to the problem that I'm looking at now. So I need to process an array, and I'm sort of doing things in like two parts of the array. One is I am like the one part of the array is like where I am copying my values into, and then the other one is where I'm copying them from. So this is kind of a common pattern with arrays, and this is like ringing a bell in the back of my mind of like the dual pointer or the dual index approach. So I'm kind of fuzzy on this, to be honest with you, but let's see how I navigate. So if I think about how I process this, what I'm doing is I can keep track of like two indexes or two pointers. They start out at the same. They start out like left index, right index are both 0. And it doesn't get interesting until I get to the 2. And what happens when I find a match is my left pointer or my left index stays the same. It no longer continues increasing. But my right index does. My right index always increments by 1 no matter what. And so what that means is my left index will stay at the first match, and my right index will keep going. And then I can wait until my right index is not a match. And so I have my left index still at that sort of first match, and my right index at the first not match. And then I can copy my right element over to my left index. I guess this is reversed for you, sorry. So I replace that 2 with the 3, and then I increment both of them. So my left pointer then points to the 2, and my right pointer points at the 0. And since my right index is not a match, I copy that over. Keep going, keep going, keep going. So I have this vague sort of notion that that's what I need to do. I don't know exactly what the code is going to look like, but I might straight up tell my interviewer that, like, I think I need to use like two indexes or 2 pointers here. I don't remember exactly the approach for that, but that's kind of my instinct. Does that sound like the right space to explore? And the interviewer might say, "Yep, that sounds right. I like that instinct. Let's code that up." Or they might say, "Actually, that I don't think that'll work here. Can you think of any other approaches?" And then that's kind of my hint that, okay, actually, my pattern matching was wrong. But I think in this case, it will work. So let's see. I don't know if I need that not equal count, but I'm going to keep it around for now, and I'm going to comment the rest out. So what I will have is an int left index equals 0, and a right index that starts at 0, but I think I'll just kind of use my for loop to create that one. So int right index equals 0. Right index is less than nums dot length, and right index plus plus. So my right index is trucking along pretty much no matter what. Okay, and now I need to think real carefully about that logic that I just explained. So my right index is the thing that I really care about, because that's the value that I'm copying from. My left index kind of lags behind, and I think of the right index kind of as the driver of this logic. So I need to, I don't know, maybe I'll get an element. So int right element equals nums of right index. And here I need to check if it's a match or not. So I've been thinking in terms of when it's not a match. That's maybe a little backwards, but it's how it's fitting in my brain, so I'm going to stick with it. So if right element is not equal to val, so it's not a match, then I need to what? I need to, I know that I'm going to increment my left index here, left index plus plus, because I have I have found something that is not a match. So this is the happy path. So if I'm 0, I do nothing, and left index increases by 1, right index increases by 1, get to 1. When I get to 2, so they're both 2 at this point, this is where it gets interesting. So my right index will keep going, but my left index will not. So my left index will stay at 2. My right index will become 3, and that'll be this 2. Same deal. Then it'll become 4. Probably should have written this down instead of using my hands, but so I've got my left index at 2, which is this 2, and my right index is 4, which is this 3. So that is this case, and before I increase my left index, I need to copy the right element over. So I need to say nums of left index equals right element. This feels right. So I'm at 2 and 4. So I'm at this 2 and this 3. So then I say copy this 3 over into this 2, and then increase my left index. So my left index goes here. My right index will become 5. So wait, my left index becomes 3, and my right index becomes 5. Again, I should have written this down. So I'm at 0, 1, 2, 3 on my left index, and 5 on my right index. So this 0 gets copied into this space. So I am doing the shifting down as I iterate through each single element. So I'm no longer shifting the entire array down. I'm pulling from the right index to the left index. So as long as the number at my right index is not a match, then I copy it over to my left index, and then I keep trucking. I increase both. And I also need this not equal count. So not equal count plus plus. Actually, since now that I'm staring at it, since my not equal count and my left index, I do the exact same thing. I initialize them to 0, and then I increment them at the same exact time. I actually think I don't need this not equal count anymore. I think I can just get away with the left index. So I've got my left index. I loop over the entire array for my right index. And when my right index is not a match, then I copy it over to my left index, and I increase my left index by 1. So in the case of, let's say, where's the case where is there one where there's no matches? No, but let's just imagine that there are no matches. I have an array of, 0, 1, and 2, and my val is 147. So in that case, I'm just going to be copying the element to itself, which is like a no-op, and it's fine. It just doesn't change the array. So then I need to what? I need to return my left index. All right. Let's run this and see what happens. All right. Okay. The gimme cases seem to pass. And now let's submit this monster. And all right. Cool. Okay, so my solution is now, let's see. So my interviewer, back in an interview environment, my interviewer might say, okay, cool. Now what is the runtime complexity of your solution here? And so I've got a single for loop, and everything I do in here is constant time. So my single for loop is now linear. So it's O of n. So I feel pretty good. I've got maybe a more optimal solution here. But as always, your interviewer is not going to say, great job, you did it, and then let's just sit here in silence for 20 awkward minutes. They'll then have likely follow-ups. So this is where you might go back to the description and think about how the assumptions might be like violated. So in this case, I don't know. I'm struggling to come up with one, but let's say, for example, you would you do something different with strings, for example, or would you do something different if nums was so huge that you couldn't do it in a single function? You actually had to do it over multiple like function calls where it would maybe continually call a function or something. I don't know. I'm kind of struggling to come up with follow-up questions because honestly, I've been recording these videos all day and my brain is fried. But you would likely get more follow-up questions. So be ready for that. But I think I feel pretty good about this solution. I started with something that was brute force and not in place. Got that working and felt okay about it, and then iterated and used a algorithm called, like, it's not really an algorithm, but an approach called like dual pointers or dual indexes to process my array in a single pass instead of needing that like nested for loop. So I'm feeling pretty good. Hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. And until then, happy interviewing.